Swatch. I would like to share another example with you from another industry. And this is the example of Hilti. Now, I have to admit, it's not a Swiss example. Hilti is a drilling machine company from the Principality of Liechtenstein, but it's really tiny, so we can almost say it belongs to Switzerland, right? Now, what did Hilti do? They innovated the business model as well. And so how did they start? Here, the trigger was not actually a crisis like in the case of Swatch. The trigger for the business model innovation of Hilti was an observation, a discovery. And this discovery was actually our customers, they don't want to buy a drilling machine, they want to buy the hole. Well, this was kind of mind-blowing. And more precisely, what Hilti discovered when they observed the customers at the construction site is that basically the biggest pain point for the customer is to have really access to the tool in the right place at the right time. Now, for those who have been already on construction sites, they know machines get lost a lot, they need to be repaired, you have to have in place different tools for different jobs to be done. So how was Hilti going to address this pain? Of course, they could have improved the performance of the drilling machine, make it even more powerful, etc. But this would not solve the customer pain point. What the customer needs to have is a guaranteed access to the tool he needs to avoid the costly downtimes at construction sites. So if a worker cannot work for 1 or 2 days, this costs a lot of money. So the business model that Hilti came up with was the so-called fleet management. So they adopted an approach which is used in the car industry already since quite a while, and transferred it to their industry. So how it works is the customer is basically renting a fleet of tools. He's not buying anymore the drilling machines. He's renting this fleet, and in this fleet package, he receives all the repair, maintenance, and even insurance. And this has the advantage for the customer that he has for each job the right machinery in place. So now if the customer needs to work on another job site, he can just call and he will get all the equipment he needs. Now this is a great business model, and it helped Hilti really enter a new phase of prosperity and growth. So having sold drilling machines for 50 years, nowadays over 50% of the turnover of Hilti is basically generated through this fleet management. So it really shows that even traditional businesses can really change the business model and enter in new areas of growth. And this brings me basically to another notion that I would like to discuss, and that really shows the mechanism how business model innovation works. Now, this is the productivity frontier. And what is the productivity frontier? It's basically the sum of all the best practices available in an industry. So the productivity frontier defines the output industry can achieve by the given resources at hand. And also what most companies are doing. So of course, they try to implement best practices, try to improve and move to the edge of this frontier to become the leader in their industry. It's actually not a bad thing. Of course, we need to improve every day our processes, our products, and so on. But there's just one problem with this behavior. So if we just focus on, implementing best practices and optimizing the business model, we are not able to achieve new growth because every company is doing the same. They are moving in the same direction. So there's very little potential for differentiation. Of course, competition is really high and margins are low. And this is what is called the so-called red ocean. So companies are stuck. There's not a lot of way to differentiate itself. And now this is the big difference to business model innovation. So what business model innovation or business model innovators are actually doing? They're not trying, to move to this frontier. and optimizing their business model. They are basically defining a new productivity frontier by finding totally new ways how to create and capture value through the introduction of a new business model. And by doing so, of course, new growth can be generated. There's a very nice quotation from INSEAD professors. So the only way to beat your competition is to stop trying to beat your competition. So by just trying to imitate what your competitors are doing, you might be able to optimize your productivity and your business model, but at a certain point you will stuck. And then you need to really think about new ways how you can achieve growth. Fantastic. Now, so having introduced this framework, I think that's one question you all should ask yourself. So in which zone are you competing? Are you stuck in the red ocean? Or are you already swimming to the nice blue ocean where little competition is available and basically you are able to achieve new growth? Now just ask yourself, well, if you come now to the conclusion that actually, right, we did not invest too much into business model innovation lately, and we are working so hard and we're not achieving the results we want to achieve, don't be disappointed. You're not the only one. Actually, there are only a few companies that are really successful at business model innovation. And even more than that, so according to a study from the MNCs, only 10% of the innovation budget is actually spent on business model innovation. So this is quite a paradox, thinking about all the benefits that business model innovation can bring, and then hearing that it's kind of neglected still in companies. Only 10% of the innovation budget is invested into business model innovation. It's kind of disappointing. So how can we explain this gap? And one of the explanations is quite simple. Business model innovation is not an easy thing to do. It's actually quite complex. Because if we think about what is actually a business model? Now, a business model in its basic terms has to answer 4 main questions. The first question is the what. So what kind of value proposition do I offer to my customers, products and services, and so on. The second is the who. So to whom I'm actually offering my services, my products. Then we have the how question. The how, so how I'm going to produce my value proposition, how am I going to deliver to the customer. And fourth, and this is probably the most exciting question, is the why. So why does my business generate a profit? Now, what does business model innovation mean in this context? A business model innovation typically changes multiple of those 4 dimensions. So in contrast to, for instance, product innovation that mainly focus on the what dimension, so we try to come out with new products, business model innovation means changing at least 2, and most of the times, multiple of those elements, so up to 3 or 4. And this makes, of course, business model innovation very, very complex. Because if you think about how to innovate multiple elements at one time, it's not an easy thing to do. A company often works still in silos, and another big problem is that innovation is still, and especially in Europe, perceived as a function of R&D. So we are trying to come up with new technologies, new products, but we are forgetting to innovate basically all the elements of the business model. So it's really a cross-functional exercise that needs to be undertaken. And of course, this is nothing easy to do, right? Now, talking about this gap and business model innovation is being that difficult, we, and when I say we, means our research institute in St. Gallen, we had a dream. We had a dream and a vision. And this was, can we help companies to become more innovative when it comes to the business model? So we tried to understand, is there actually kind of a formula that could help us to systematically innovate the business model? Are there some recipes that can be learned from those companies that already innovated the business model? maybe even design a construction methodology, how we can systematically think about innovative business models for ourselves. Now, to answer this question, we had a look on over 350 business model innovators from the last 50 years. And we studied them carefully. So, can we discover some patterns, some commonalities that might help to explain how business model innovation works? Now, the result it came up with was the following. Okay, I understand. So it's not a self-explanatory graph, but the most important thing here is the title. So the result of our research was basically that 90% of all business model innovation can be traced back to a combination of 55 repeating business model patterns. Well, you might now think, wait, we're talking about innovation, and this lady is now telling us you have to reuse something that already existed before. Exactly, this is what I'm telling you. Now let me give you one example, or two examples. Now, think about those three products. So what do you think they have in common? Do you have any ideas from the audience? I can help you, it's not the shape, it's also not the color. Any spontaneous ideas, suggestions? Disposables. Okay, here we talk. Right, so of course, it's nothing that the product itself have in common. It is the business model. And all of those three products deploy a business model pattern which is called razor and blade. So this razor and blade pattern works the following. You give a basic device, basically for free or at very low costs to your customers, and you generate the revenues with the consumables. And now, the exciting thing here is, and this is what you can see on this line, this business model has been used by many innovative companies in many, many different industries. So it has been transferred all over the way from one industry to another and have provoked an innovative business model in this respective industry. One of the first companies that has used the razor and blade pattern was Standard Oil. So what they did is they gave away petroleum lamps at very cheap cost to the population to really trigger the demand for the oil the company was producing. In the next stage, King Gillette also used this business model to found his company called Gillette, which is all known. Now, what was the invention here? So King Gillette came up with the disposable razors, which were not existing at this time before. And he was very clever, because he knew, well, I need to kind of change the way customers are using razors. So he gave away the razors for free to the military, to the university, to really trigger the demand for his blades. And as we know still, the blades are quite expensive, right, from Gillette. The razor itself is quite cheap. And this story continued. Hewlett-Packard, that invented basically the printer for private use, they're using the same logic. You can get this device at almost, very little cost. But if you want to buy the inkjet cartridge, it's becoming quite expensive. Nespresso, one of the most successful business model innovation experts from Switzerland, they're also using the razor and blade pattern. So the espresso machine from Nespresso is actually quite affordable. Compared to our Italian nice espresso machine, you will only pay a fraction. But the consumable itself is costs quite a money. And actually, this razor and blade business model, I think the CEO of Nestle seems to like it, because they are also using it now for two other product lines. The specialty, so there are capsules for tea, and even for baby food. So it seems to be a quite successful business model the company is relying its success on. Now, the bottom line here, as I mentioned on the slide before, is that in order to come up with an innovative business model in your industry, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. you can rely on the 55 models and try to transfer some of those patterns and recombine them with your specific product and the different context or customer need. So this is really a new systematic way how to think about business model innovation. Another example to give you. So what do you think is the commonality here? We have a black sock, again, razor, and diapers. Now, I will help you on this. So basically, all of the free products, they are used in a subscription model. So we all know subscription model for a long time. So newspapers have used it since centuries. And the invention here, or the business model innovation, the subscription model has been adopted by products or companies that have been not working along the subscription model. Black Socks is a very nice example from Switzerland. So Black Socks was founded approximately 20 years ago. And the business model they came up with is called the so-called subscription. So the subscription is a subscription model for socks. Now you might think, so why do we need a subscription? So the story goes like the founder of this company has been invited once to a Japanese tea ceremony. And there you need to take off your shoes. Now, the founder became quite embarrassed because one of his socks had a hole and the other, the colors just did not match. So he said, why cannot we have a constant supply of the same black sock? And this is how he came up with this idea. And it's actually a very, very successful business model. Now you see there are no limits to deploy, basically, the different business model patterns. Diaper.com is a startup that is selling subscription for diapers. We have the Dollar Shave Club. So this is a startup that from the Silicon Valley, and they basically have invented a subscription model for razors. They actually have been bought for $1 billion by Unilever recently. So there's nothing new about the product, but it's the business model and more the adoption of a business model pattern that has really enabled the success of those companies. So in order to innovate our business model, you don't have to be geniuses. We can rely on existing business model recipes and think about how we can deploy them to our particular business, to our particular product. And this is where really the innovation potential stems from. Now, I have shown you examples about socks and coffee and even diapers. Now, to really give you a proof that this methodology works, I would like to share one last case study with you. And this is the case of SpeedGrid. SpeedGrid is a business model innovation from Indonesia. And SpeedGrid has innovated one of the most traditional and uninnovative products in this world. And this is basically concrete, cement and concrete. Now, just for those who are not familiar with this product, so concrete is around since over 2,000 years. The roof from the Pantheon in Rome is built out of concrete, and even the old Egypt has used some kind of similar materials to build their pyramids. Now, really, the product itself and the business is very traditional. Now, SpeedGrid has changed this. And let me show you how. So let's imagine, and you can maybe guess from the picture where we are. We are in Jakarta. And for those who travel there know that traffic can really become very, very painful. So it's actually one of the biggest national problems, and especially it shows in Jakarta. So traffic, a lot of traffic jams, and it's very hard to move from one place to the other. Now, let's imagine there comes a solution that enables, in this environment, to repair roads in less than 7 hours. And this is what SpeedGrid is about. So what SpeedGrid is doing, all the steps from preparing job sites, really cutting old surfaces, pouring new concrete, and reopen the road, are performed in only 7 hours. Now, it sounds exciting, but probably even more exciting if I tell you that the normal time to do this is about 2 weeks. Now, you might ask yourself, so, okay, what has this to do with business model innovation and the business model patterns? Now, let me show you how SpeedGrid was developed. And so, how everything started, basically, and since the first way also how we normally think about solving problems is a new product was invented. In this case, a new fast-setting concrete was performing quite quick, and it has some really good strength properties. So this was the first approach to solve the problem. Well, there was just one problem. Nobody would like to buy this concrete. And the reason why, so the typical customers, the contractors, it was way too expensive. So how contractors normally work, they work with a specified budget, and they have to optimize the costs with the budget they receive from their customers, the project owners or road operators, for instance. Now, the cost, the price pressure was a problem. And there was also a risk of wrong application. SpeedGrid is very sophisticated to place. You have to place this in 30 minutes. And so doing a mistake here can cause severe problems. Even the concrete is stuck in the truck, which is costing a lot of money, or there will some cracks on the road. So was also another problem. Why SpeedGrid was not making any money. And this is, of course, where now business model innovation comes into the game. So one of the great strengths of business model innovation is actually to capture the value of great products or great technologies. It's not just enough to innovate the product, we have to wrap a sound business model around it. And this is what SpeedGrid does. Now, how did they do it? They did it by having a look on the 55 patterns and innovating all of the 4 business model elements around it by using those 4 selected patterns. So the first one they deployed was the direct selling one. So now, since contractors were not really willing to pay for SpeedGrid, which is more expensive, of course, due to the technology innovation embedded in the concrete, they addressed directly the end customer. In this particular case, for instance, toll road operators or airports that really have the need to be or to have their properties basically repaired in a very quick time, because time is money in this case. So they changed the customer segment. Now, since these customers most of the time have no idea about construction, would not be enough just to deliver the concrete to the site and leave the customer alone with it. So you need to offer an integrated solution that would really offer a turnkey solution to the customer to get his premises repaired. So a second option or second business model pattern was the integrator that was applied on the how dimension. Now, having changed the customer segment and offering integrated solution, most of the time you have to also think about a new revenue model. So typically concrete is sold in cubic meters. But now these customers, I mean, they're not interested in what a cubic meter costs. They want to understand what is the end price of the solution. So a square meter based approach was deployed, talking about performance-based contracting business model pattern. And to complete basically the business model, because those customers are very time sensitive, a guarantee was even offered. So either the road is repaired in 7 hours or the customer does not pay anything. And now what happened? By changing all 4 dimensions of the business model, SpeedGrid was able to take off. And the journey still continues. So by introducing and basically combining a business model with this great concrete, really the success could be achieved. And even the SpeedGrid solution was endorsed by Jakarta's vice governor. So really a great business model example that shows by using the 55 models and combining innovative business models with innovative technologies, this is the way to the future. Now, I could stop this presentation here. So we have learned that there are systematic approaches, it's great, you have seen successful examples, but I want to be honest with you. And since it's just basically us today here, I want to share a secret. And I want you to do that, take you a little behind the scenes. Now, what I just explained about the success of SpeedGrid, to be honest, the process was just not as smooth as just presented. So actually, it took several years from the idea to the successful commercialization of the product. In the very beginning, it was a fly under the radar project even. And there was partial resistance on the organization. So even though now SpeedGrid is kind of a success story, it was not that easy. And actually, there was a lot of resistance against it in the organization in the beginning. Another reason why? Because SpeedGrid was pushing basically the company out of its comfort zone. So everything the company used to do and used to know, which customers to serve, how the processes should work, what the revenue model should be, but challenged. And was just not as easy to adopt to this new business model, right? New risk has to be overtaken as well. So if you offer an integrated solution, we have to bear new risks and you're more responsible for. So it was not an easy process. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you today is because, and this is one of my last messages for now, business model innovation starts really in the mindset of each single employee and company. Now, you can have the best processes and tools in your hand, but this is only one side of the story. If you don't believe in business model innovation, and if you're not willing, basically, to question the pillar of your success, it will become really hard. Of course, this is maybe a little bit exaggerated, but the truth is that a lot of companies still struggle to question the key pillars of success and adopt a new logic into the business. So every company, every industry, especially those that have been successful in the past, runs along a certain logic. And it's very hard to change this logic, especially if the company has been very, very successful. So we have to really, in order to be able to innovate our business model, we have to unlearn, basically, what we are good at. And we have to challenge the orthodoxies of our industry. So we have all a certain belief system in our mind how a certain business should work. Now, if we talk about the example in the beginning, Uber, well, it's one of the most successful transportation companies. They don't own one car, and they're not basically hiring any taxi drivers. If you look at Airbnb, one of the largest hotel chain in the world, they're not owning one single hotel. Skype became the biggest telecommunication company in this world. They don't have any infrastructure. So we have, in order to open our mind for business model and become innovative, we have to start with the mindset and really forget what we know of our business and be open to new approaches how to run the business. It's not an easy thing to do, but believe me, it will pay off in the medium and long term. Now, for those who are already ready to step out of your comfort zone, this is the book that was already promoted. It explains you all the 55 business model patterns and also gives you a systematic approach how you basically can use these patterns to innovate your business model. Now, I'm coming to the end of my speech. I wish you the best of luck to really embrace business model innovation in your organization, and thank you very much for your attention.